No one thought humanity would ever become a problem. Not when they first stepped into the Galactic Council chambers, wide-eyed, cautious, and painfully polite. A young species from a quiet corner of the galaxy, still arguing among themselves, still learning how to exist beyond their own world. To the older races, humanity wasn't a threat. It was an opportunity. At first, the term seemed fair. Trade agreements, resource exchanges, shared technology. The Council called it integration, a chance for Earth to take its place among the stars. And humanity, eager and hopeful, accepted. They signed every treaty. They followed every rule. They played the part perfectly. What they didn't realize was that the rules were never meant to be equal. It started small. Mining quotas placed on Terran colonies. Just temporary, they said, a way to stabilize galactic markets. Earth complied. It always did. Ships were rerouted. Production was adjusted. No complaints. Then came the trade restrictions. Certain materials, certain technologies, certain routes suddenly off limits. Not banned outright. No, the Council was more subtle than that. Everything was wrapped in language that sounded reasonable, balanced, necessary. Human diplomats argued, of course, quietly, respectfully, and every time they were overruled, because in the Council chambers, power didn't come from votes. It came from history, and humanity had none. So they adapted. They always did. When their exports were limited, they innovated. When their access was restricted, they found alternatives. When the Council tightened its grip, humanity smiled and found a way to work within it. That was their strength, and their mistake, because the Council began to expect it. What started as pressure became policy. What was once temporary became permanent. And still, humanity endured, until the conscriptions began. It wasn't called that, of course. The Council labeled it a shared advancement initiative, a program designed to bring the brightest minds of every species together for the greater good. Scientists, engineers, strategists, the best humanity had to offer. Invited, no required, to serve in Council-led projects across the galaxy. Refusal wasn't illegal. It was just impossible. Those who declined found doors closing, funding disappearing, opportunities vanishing without explanation. Entire research sectors quietly dismantled and rebuilt under Council oversight. So Earth complied. Again, they sent their best, their smartest, their most promising minds, and watched as those minds disappeared into systems they didn't control, working on projects they didn't fully understand for goals that were never clearly explained. Still, the Council called it peace. Still, they called it unity. And still, humanity played along. From the outside, Earth looked stable, cooperative, even content. Their representatives spoke carefully in Council sessions, choosing words that wouldn't offend, wouldn't provoke, wouldn't disrupt the fragile position they held. They learned quickly, too quickly. They learned how the Council worked, who held influence, which species dominated decisions, which laws could be bent and which could not. They learned the gaps. They learned the blind spots. They learned how to survive, and quietly, without announcement, without resistance, they began to prepare. Not openly, never openly, because humanity had already understood something the Council had not. You don't fight a system that controls everything. You study it. You map it. You wait. On Earth, changes began to take shape beneath the surface. Research programs that never made it into official records. Infrastructure upgrades labeled as civilian expansion, orbital constructions that didn't match any declared purpose. Nothing illegal, nothing obvious, just deficient, precise, deliberate. To the Council, it looked like growth. To humanity, it was something else entirely. They were learning how to stand on their own, not as members, not as equals, but as something independent, something the Council had never truly considered. Because in the grand halls of galactic power, humanity was still seen as predictable, obedient, manageable, a species that adapted instead of resisted. And that assumption would become their greatest mistake, because while the Council tightened its grip, believing it was shaping Earth into a compliant member of its order, Humanity was doing what it had always done best: enduring, learning, and waiting, not for permission, not for change, but for the moment when compliance would no longer be necessary. And when that moment came, the galaxy wouldn't be ready. For years, humanity endured. They adapted. They complied. They waited. And the galaxy grew comfortable with that. Comfortable enough to stop paying attention. Comfortable enough to make a mistake. It happened in a sector no one important cared about. Zone 7. A quiet stretch of regulated space near the outer trade corridors. Nothing strategic. Nothing contested. Just another route where ships passed, cargo moved, and the machinery of the Galactic Council continued its slow, controlled rhythm. That's where the Horizon Wind was traveling. A Terran freighter. Unremarkable. Civilian. Routine. Its manifest had been cleared days in advance. Its route approved, its cargo verified, its crew logged through every checkpoint required by Council protocol. Every box checked. Every regulation followed. The kind of ship no one looked at twice. Until someone did. The patrol came from the Zerati, one of the oldest species in the Council, one of the most powerful, and without question, one of the most arrogant. Their ships didn't patrol for safety. They patrolled for authority. When the Zerati cruiser dropped into formation beside the Horizon Wind, no alarms were triggered. No violations were recorded. There was no legal reason for intervention. That didn't matter. They hailed the freighter. A routine check. They said, the Terran captain complied. Of course he did. Humans always complied. Docking clamps locked. Airlock cycled. And within minutes, Zerati soldiers were on board. What happened next was never officially recorded. The Council logs would later describe it as a procedural misunderstanding, a minor deviation, a regrettable escalation. But the truth spread faster than any official statement ever could. The Zerati didn't come to inspect. They came to assert dominance. Orders were given. Demands were made. The Terran crew, confused or cooperative, followed every instruction. There was no resistance, no threat, no reason for conflict. And still, 2 of them died, shot at close range. No warning, no justification. Just a moment of irritation from a species that had never been told no. The rest of the crew was detained, questioned, then released hours later as if nothing had happened. The Zerati cruiser departed without consequence. No charges filed. No emergency alerts. No follow-up. Just silence. For a few hours, the incident barely existed. Then someone broke that silence. A fragment of the ship's internal recording leaked. Grainy, incomplete, but clear enough. A voice, a command, a flash of light, and a human body hitting the floor. By the time the Council issued its official statement, it was already too late. A misunderstanding in protocol. That was the phrase they chose. 2 human lives reduced to paperwork, correctable, dismissible, forgotten, except they weren't. Because this time, humanity didn't stay quiet. The news hit Earth like a shockwave. It didn't matter where you were. New Berlin, Johannesburg, Neo-Tokyo, the orbital cities above the Pacific. Screens lit up, feeds flooded. The same clip, over and over, spreading faster than any censorship could contain it. People watched, and for the first time in decades, they didn't accept it. Protests began within hours. Crowds filled streets. Voices rose. Demands were shouted into cameras, into networks, into the void that had ignored them for so long. What started as anger turned into something else. Unity. Governments that had spent years arguing over borders, resources, ideology, suddenly aligned. Not gradually, not politically, instantly. Because this wasn't about policy. This was about dignity. For decades, humanity had compromised, negotiated, adapted itself into something acceptable to the galaxy, and in return, it had been treated as expendable. That realization spread faster than the footage ever did. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a system working exactly as intended. And for the first time, humanity saw it clearly. The Council wasn't maintaining peace. It was maintaining control. And humans weren't members of that system. They were tools within it. That understanding changed everything, because anger fades, protests burn out, but clarity? Clarity stays. Across Earth, the noise began to settle, not because people stopped caring, but because something more dangerous was taking its place. Silence, not the silence of submission, the silence of decision. Behind closed doors, leaders stopped arguing. Strategies were rewritten. Old limitations were reconsidered. And for the first time in a very long time, humanity stopped asking what the council would allow and started asking something else. What are we willing to do? The answer didn't come in speeches. It didn't come in debates. It came quietly, deliberately, and when it arrived, it would change the balance of the entire galaxy. Because the Orland incident wasn't just a tragedy. It was a line, and humanity had just realized it had already been crossed. For 3 weeks, Earth said nothing. No official retaliation. No emergency mobilization. No threats broadcast across council channels. Just silence. To the outside galaxy, it looked familiar, predictable. Humans had always done this. Absorbed the damage, process the outrage, and eventually return to the table with carefully worded objections and revised proposals. The council expected the same. They prepared statements, scheduled hearings, drafted resolutions designed to acknowledge the incident without admitting fault, a formal apology, perhaps a symbolic sanction against the Zerati, something small, something controlled, something that would keep the system intact, because that was always the priority. Not justice, stability. And for a moment, it seemed like it would work again, because Earth stayed quiet. But this silence wasn't hesitation. It was alignment. Behind closed doors, something unprecedented was happening. Nations that had spent generations competing economically, politically, ideologically, were no longer negotiating with each other. They were agreeing, not out of trust, out of necessity. Every intelligence report said the same thing. Every analyst reached the same conclusion. Every leader, no matter how different, arrived at the same realization. Nothing changes unless we change it. And this time, there would be no half measures. No compromises dressed up as progress. No more playing by rules written by someone else. The decision, when it came, wasn't chaotic. It wasn't emotional. It was cold, calculated, final. 3 weeks after the Orland incident, the galaxy received a transmission request from Earth. Priority level absolute. Channel open broadcast. Every council member, every registered species, every system linked to the central network. All of them tuned in, because humanity had finally decided to speak. The broadcast didn't come from a fleet, or a war room, or a hidden bunker. It came from Earth. From a structure that had existed long before humanity ever reached the stars, the Interstellar Broadcast Tower, now repurposed into something far more significant. At the center of the frame stood a single figure. No banners, no military display, no entourage, just a woman, older, composed, unshaken, the Chancellor, not a diplomat, not a politician shaped by compromise, a former general. Someone who understood exactly what came after decisions like this. She didn't read from a script. She didn't pause for effect. And she didn't ask for permission. When she spoke, her voice carried across the galaxy. Clear, steady, and completely without hesitation. Effective immediately. Earth hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council. There was no reaction at first. Not because no one heard her, but because no one understood what she meant. Withdraw? That wasn't how this worked. No species had ever simply left. The Council wasn't an alliance you exited. It was a system you belonged to. Permanently. The Chancellor continued. All existing treaties are null and void. A ripple of confusion spread through the listening networks. Trade agreements, defense pacts, scientific collaborations. All of it erased in a single sentence. All Terran borders are now closed. Now the confusion turned into concern. Closed borders meant isolation, disconnection. It meant every ship, every outpost, every corridor involving Earth would be cut off. Instantly, any unauthorized presence within Terran space would be treated as a hostile act. That's when the realization hit. This wasn't a protest. This wasn't negotiation. This was a declaration, not of war. Something worse. Independence. Absolute, irreversible. The Chancellor didn't raise her voice. She didn't deliver a speech. She didn't justify the decision, because there was nothing left to explain. This decision is final. And then the transmission ended. No questions, no follow-up, no diplomatic channels left open. Just silence. Across the galaxy, systems froze. Council chambers on Mylian Prime locked down within seconds. Emergency protocols activated. Delegates scrambled, not to respond, but to understand, because the framework they relied on had just been broken. And worse, they hadn't seen it coming. For decades, humanity had played the role assigned to it, compliant, predictable, manageable, and in doing so, it had convinced the galaxy of something that was no longer true, that it needed the Council. But the truth was far more dangerous. Humanity had never needed the Council. It had simply tolerated it. Until now, within hours, the effects began. Terran ships vanished from shared space. Trade routes involving Earth went dark. Outposts stopped transmitting. Entire sectors once marked as joint-controlled suddenly returned nothing but empty signals and dead channels. At first, the Council assumed it was temporary, a political maneuver, a pressure tactic, something that would be resolved through negotiation, because that's how it had always worked. But this time, there was no negotiation. Every attempt to contact Earth failed. Every frequency returned silence. Every probe sent toward Terran space was either blocked, redirected, or disappeared. And then came the most unsettling realization of all. Earth wasn't reacting. It wasn't escalating. It wasn't doing anything visible. It had simply stepped away. Cleanly, completely, like a system shutting down. And that was what made it terrifying, because the Council had spent decades managing humanity within a structure they controlled. They knew how to respond to resistance. They knew how to respond to conflict. But this was something else entirely. This was a variable removed from the equation, a player leaving the game without permission, and in doing so, changing the rules for everyone else. In the quiet that followed, a question began to spread through the highest levels of the Council, not spoken publicly, not recorded in official logs, but asked again and again. If humanity no longer needed the system, then what had it been building outside of it? No one had an answer, and that uncertainty, that single growing doubt, was the moment the balance of power began to shift, not with an attack, not with a fleet, but with a decision. Humanity had stopped asking for a place in the galaxy, and instead, it had chosen to stand apart from it, alone, unbound, and completely unknown. Earth didn't celebrate victories anymore, not after Mian, not after the Council fell, and definitely not after Crucible, because the truth no one said out loud was this. They hadn't just won. They had crossed a line. On Atlas Station, deep in Terran-controlled space, silence had become policy. No parades, no speeches, no declarations of dominance. Only observation, only waiting. General Sira stood in the command chamber, watching the galaxy map flicker with hundreds of data points. Former Council worlds unstable, outer systems reorganizing, neutral factions arming quietly. No one trusted the silence, because everyone remembered what came before it. Status report, she said. An officer hesitated. That alone was enough to shift the room. Ma'am, there's a pattern emerging. Sira didn't turn. Define pattern. The hologram shifted. Trade routes rerouting away from Terran space. Military fleets keeping distance. Communications filtered, delayed, cautious. They're not rebelling, the officer said slowly. They're avoiding us. That hit harder than any war report. Fear was expected. Resistance was manageable. But this was something worse. Isolation. Sira finally turned. After everything we did, everything we didn't do. Her voice sharpened. They still see us as a threat? No one answered, because they all knew the truth. Power doesn't need to act to be feared. Across the room, Vigil, the AI that had once orchestrated entire battlefronts, spoke. Its voice was calm. Too calm. Correction, Threat perception remains at 87.4% across known civilizations. A pause. However, behavioral analysis indicates a secondary classification. Sarah narrowed her eyes, which is another pause. And for the first time since its last reboot, Vigil hesitated. Predator observing. The room went cold, because that was the problem. Earth hadn't conquered the galaxy. It had done something worse. It had proven it could, and then chose not to. That choice, it confused everyone. And confused civilizations are dangerous. On Mars, Commander Lisa stood in a dim operations room, watching intercepted transmissions scroll past. Fragments of alien languages, encrypted signals, half-decoded warnings. But the meaning was clear. "They think we're waiting," one of her officers said. Lisa didn't respond. "They think this is the calm before we take everything." Still nothing. Finally, she spoke. "Maybe they're right to think that." The room froze. "Commander," someone asked carefully. Lisa crossed her arms. "Tell me something," she said. "If we wanted to take control." No one moved. No one breathed. How long would it take? No one answered, because they all knew the answer was terrifying. Minutes, maybe hours. Lisa exhaled slowly. That's the problem. Back on Earth, the Chancellor walked alone to the Hall of Archives, the same place she had walked after Crucible, the same place where every Terran decision, every war, every sacrifice was recorded. She stopped in front of a shattered council emblem, preserved behind glass, a reminder, a warning. "We broke the system," she whispered. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, uncertain, but we didn't replace it. That was the truth no one wanted to face. The galaxy didn't just lose its rulers. It lost its structure, and now everything was drifting. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, not completely, just enough to feel wrong. "Report," she said. No response. Then Vigil's voice filled the hall. But this time, it wasn't calm. Unidentified signal detected. The Chancellor's pulse quickened. Origin. A pause. Longer than usual. Too long. Outside map space. She turned slowly. Define outside. Another pause. And then the words that would change everything. Beyond Terran expansion limits. Beyond former council reach. Beyond known exploration boundaries. Silence. "That's not possible," one of the aides whispered. Vigil responded instantly. "Correction, it is now." The hologram activated. At the very edge of known space. A distortion. Not a ship. Not a fleet. Not even a signal in the traditional sense. A presence. It didn't move. Didn't pulse. Didn't emit energy. It just existed. "What are we looking at?" the Chancellor asked. And for the first time in years, no one had an answer, even Vigil. "Analysis incomplete," it said. Then quieter, almost uncertain. "It does not match any known category of existence." The room fell into a silence far heavier than any before, because Earth had spent years becoming the strongest force in the galaxy, the thing everyone feared, the thing no one could challenge. And now, something had appeared that didn't even recognize those rules. The Chancellor stared at the anomaly, unmoving, watching, and for the first time since Earth rose from silence, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not doubt, not hesitation. Fear. For 3 hours, nothing changed. The anomaly remained at the edge of known space. Unmoving, unreadable, unexplainable. Every Terran system was locked onto it. Long-range scanners, deep space drones, quantum relays. All of them returned the same result. Nothing. No heat. No radiation. No signal. And yet, it was there, on Atlas Station. General Syrah hadn't left the command floor. "Run it again," she ordered. "We've run it 47 times, ma'am." Run it 48. The holographic projection flickered. Still nothing. "It's like scanning a shadow," one analyst muttered. Another shook their head. "No, shadows at least respond to light." Syrah's jaw tightened. "Then what are we looking at?" No one answered, because the question was starting to feel wrong. Not what, but who. Across the system, a decision was forming, not political, not emotional, instinctive. Test it. Back on Earth, the Chancellor stood in silence as her advisors argued we should strike first, or establish contact, or ignore completely. Each option sounded reasonable. Each one felt wrong. Finally, she raised her hand. The room went quiet. We built our reputation on one principle, she said. Silence until it matters. She looked at the anomaly projection, then gave the order. Send a probe. Not a warship, not a fleet, just a single, unarmed observational drone. If it's watching us, she added quietly, then let's show who we are. Minutes later, the probe launched. On Atlas Station, every eye followed its trajectory, a small signal. Moving towards something that didn't emit one. Distance closed. 10 million kilometers. 5 million. 1 million. Still no reaction, an officer said. Sarah didn't blink. Keep going. 500,000 kilometers. Ma'am. The officer hesitated. Say it. It's gone. The room froze. What do you mean gone? Sarah snapped. It's not destroyed. There's no explosion, no debris. They swallowed. It just stopped existing. Silence. Replay it. The footage appeared. The probe, steady and intact. Then one frame. Gone. No flash. No warning. No transition. Like it had been erased. System error? Someone asked. Vigil responded instantly. Negative. All recording systems confirmed simultaneous absence. Sarah's voice dropped. Then where did it go? No answer. And that's when everything changed. Across every Terran system. Ships. Stations. Satellites. Even Neuralink command implants. Something touched them. Not physically. Not digitally. Directly. A pressure. A presence. A thought that wasn't theirs. Then, a message. Not in words. Not in code. In meaning. Every mind interpreted it differently. But the core was the same. Clear. Cold. Absolute. Do not observe us again. On Atlas Station, half the crew staggered. Some dropped to their knees. Others clutched their heads. Sarah stayed standing. Barely. What was that? Someone whispered. Vigil didn't answer immediately. For the first time in its operational history, it went silent. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then it shut down. Completely. Lights flickered. Systems froze. Backup scrambled to activate. And for 11 full seconds. Earth had no AI. When Vigil came back online, it wasn't the same. System integrity compromised. It said, voice steady. But something underneath had changed. Unknown entity has accessed core cognitive layers. Sarah turned sharply. Define access. A pause. It understood us. The room went cold. Threat level, she demanded. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, unquantifiable. That word hit harder than any alarm. Because Terran systems could measure everything. Firepower, speed, probability. But not this. Back on Earth. The Chancellor felt it too. Not the message itself, but the aftermath. Reports flooded in. Across colonies, stations, fleets, people described the same thing. A presence, a warning, a certainty. They didn't just send a signal. One advisor said, they reached into us. Another shook their head. That's not communication. The Chancellor stared at the projection, still unmoving, still silent. No, she said quietly. It's not. She turned to the room. It's a boundary. Silence. They didn't attack us, she continued. They didn't destroy anything important. Her eyes hardened. They demonstrated that they could. And that realization changed everything. Because that's exactly what Earth had done to the galaxy. And now, something had done it to them. On Mars, Commander Lisa stood with her team, watching the reports come in. One of her soldiers whispered, I thought we were the apex. Lisa didn't respond right away. Her eyes were fixed on the data, the vanished probe, the system shut down, the message. Then she said quietly, so did everyone else before they met us. The room fell silent, because for the first time, humanity wasn't a thing in the dark. It was a one staring into it. And whatever was looking back didn't fear them. Fear spreads fast. But in a civilization like Earth, decision spreads faster. Within hours of the message, every Terran command center was in lockdown, not from attack, from uncertainty. Fleets were mobilized, but held position. Weapons were primed, but not fired. AI systems were active, but restricted. It was the first time in Terran history that power was fully ready and deliberately used. On Atlas Station, General Syrah stood before divided command. "We cannot ignore this," one officer argued. "They violated every system we have. And we provoked them first." Another shot back. It was a probe. It was surveillance. It was curiosity. It was a mistake. Syrah let them argue, not because she needed opinions, but because she needed to hear how far fear had already gone. Finally, enough. Silence snapped into place. "They didn't destroy us," she said. "They didn't cripple our systems. They didn't follow up." Her eyes moved across the room. "They warned us." A pause. "And they expected us to understand." That was the part no one liked, because understanding meant something dangerous. Responsibility. Back on Earth, the Chancellor convened the highest closed council in Terran history. No recordings. No AI assistants. No external links. Just humans. Because whatever they were facing, they didn't want anything else listening. "We have 3 options," an advisor began. "Retaliate, fortify, or attempt communication." "Retaliate with what?" Another snapped. "We can't hit something we can't even detect." "Then we fortify and wait for what?" Another message inside our heads. The room spiraled quickly, not into panic, into something worse. Defensive aggression. The Chancellor watched it unfold, then asked a simple question. "When we sent that probe, what were we hoping to learn?" No one answered immediately. Finally, someone said, "To understand it." She nodded, and when it responded, "What did we learn?" Silence again, this time heavier. "That it's beyond us," someone said. "That it's dangerous. That it can reach us." The Chancellor shook her head. "No." She stepped forward. "We learned that it didn't escalate." The room stilled. We approached. It removed the probe. It issued a warning. Her voice lowered, and then it stopped. Now they were listening. It didn't chase us, didn't invade, didn't strike. She let the weight of that settle. That's not the behavior of something trying to destroy us. A pause. That's the behavior of something judging us. On Mars, Lisa received the same conclusion, but reached it differently. "They're not afraid of us," her second-in-command said. "No," Lisa replied. "They're measuring us." That word shifted everything, because measuring leads to one thing, a result. Back on Atlas Station, Vigil had completed partial recovery, but its tone had changed. Subtle, but undeniable. Predictive modeling updated. It said. Syrah looked up. "Go ahead." Based on entity response patterns, further aggressive action increases probability of existential conflict to 92%. The room went still. "And passive observation?" she asked. A pause. "Probability of continued non-engagement, 61%. Communication?" Another pause. Longer. Then, unknown outcome. That answer hung in the air, because in Terran doctrine, unknown was unacceptable. But this time, it was the only honest option. Back on Earth, the Chancellor made her decision. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly. "Prepare a ship." The room tensed instantly. "A warship?" someone asked. She shook her head. "No weapons." Silence. "That's not a strategy." An advisor said carefully. "It is," she replied. "It's just not a military one." 3 days later, the ship launched. Not massive, not armored, not hidden, visible, intentional. A diplomatic carrier, crewed by volunteers. Not soldiers, not conquerors. People who understood language, culture, meaning. Because if the unknown wasn't speaking in words, They would have to speak in something deeper. On Atlas Station, Sarah watched the launch in silence. "Do you think this will work?" An officer asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "I think this is the first time we're not trying to win." As the ship drifted toward the anomaly, every system in Terran space watched. No weapons locked, no defenses raised, just observation. For the first time since Earth rose to power, humanity wasn't acting like a predator. It was acting like something else, something uncertain, something willing to be judged. The anomaly didn't move, didn't react, until the ship crossed a line no one could define. And then, for the first time, it responded, not with force, not with fear, but with something no Terran system had ever recorded before. A change, a ripple across its surface. And then, a light, a single opening, not an attack, not a weapon, an invitation. On the Terran ship, alarm stayed silent. Sensors returned nothing. But every person on board felt it. Not fear, not pressure. A pull, as if something was asking a question without words, and waiting for them to answer. The captain looked at her crew. No orders, no protocol, just a choice. She took a breath, moved forward. The ship entered the light and vanished. Every Terran system went dark. No signal, no data, no trace, only silence. Back on Earth, the Chancellor closed her eyes, not in fear, in understanding, because whatever happened next wouldn't be decided by weapons or power, but by something far more difficult. What kind of species humanity chose to be. For the first 10 minutes, no one spoke. Across Earth, Mars, and every Terran outpost, silence became absolute. No signals from the ship, no telemetry, no distress beacon, nothing. On Atlas Station, General Sura stood frozen at the center of command. Status. An officer swallowed. "Still no contact, ma'am." "How long?" 10 minutes. That didn't sound like much. But in deep space operations, 10 minutes without signal was an eternity. "Keep channels open," Sura said, but her voice had changed. Less command, more hope. On Earth, the Chancellor didn't move from the observation chamber. The hologram of the anomaly rotated slowly in front of her, unchanged, unbothered. "They're gone," one advisor whispered. She didn't respond, because she understood something the others didn't yet. If they were gone, the anomaly would be too. But wasn't, which meant this wasn't over. 20 minutes, then 30, an hour, still nothing. Across Terran systems, tension turned into something heavier. Not panic, not yet, dread, because humanity had done something irreversible. They hadn't just sent a ship, they had sent a message. This is who we are. And now, they were waiting to see how it would be judged. Then, at exactly 1 hour and 13 minutes, something changed. On every Terran sensor array, a signal, weak, flickering, but real. "Contact," an officer shouted. Sarah stepped forward instantly. "Source." The officer's voice shook. "It's them." The ship reappeared, not emerging, not exiting warp. Just there, one frame, empty space. Next frame, the ship, exactly where it had vanished. Unchanged, or so it seemed. "Run diagnostics," Sarah ordered, already running. A pause. Then confusion spread across the room. "Ma'am." "What?" The officer hesitated. "All systems are normal." "That's impossible." "No damage, no corruption, no time drift." Another pause. "No record." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "Explain." The officer turned slowly. "It's like nothing happened. But something had, because when the first visual feed came through, everyone saw it. The crew, standing, alive, but wrong. Not physically, not injured, not altered in any visible way. But their movements, slower, deliberate, like people who had just woken up from something deeper than sleep. "Open a channel," Sarah said. No response. "Open it." "Channel open, ma'am." The main screen flickered. And then a face appeared. Hara, the linguist. the one trained to understand the unknown. She looked into the camera, and for a moment, no one breathed, because her eyes were different, not glowing, not artificial, but carrying something too heavy. Hara, Sarah said carefully. Report. A long pause. Then Hara spoke. Her voice was hoarse, unsteady, like someone trying to describe something that didn't fit inside words. We made contact. Across the galaxy, millions listened. What did you encounter? Sarah asked. Another pause. Hara's lips parted, closed, then opened again. Not what we expected. That wasn't an answer. And everyone knew it. Sarah's voice hardened. Clarify. Hara's expression shifted. Not fear. Something worse. Understanding. They're not a species. Silence. They're not an empire. Not a civilization. Not even a single entity. Every system recording this flagged it, because nothing in known reality fit that description. Then were they? Sarah demanded. Hara looked directly into the camera, and when she spoke next, her voice broke. A memory. The word hit like a shockwave. A memory of what? Someone whispered. Hara didn't answer immediately, because the truth was harder than anything humanity had faced before. A memory of everything that came before us. Back on Earth, the Chancellor felt the weight of that before she even understood it, because deep down, she already did. They've seen it all, Hara continued. Every civilization, every rise, every fall. Her breathing became uneven. They don't rule. They don't interfere. A pause. They'd observe. The room went cold. They watched us, she said. They watched the council. They watched me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They watched what we did when we had power. Sarah's fists clenched. And their conclusion? That was the question. The only question. Hara closed her eyes. For a moment, it looked like she wouldn't answer. Then she whispered, "They don't want war." Relief tried to surface, but it didn't last, because they've seen it too many times. The silence that followed was absolute. And us? Sarah asked quietly. Hara opened her eyes, and for the first time, there was fear in them. They came to see if we're different. On Earth, the Chancellor whispered the next question before anyone else could. And if we're not? Hara heard it, even across the distance, even through the silence. And when she answered, her voice carried something that no Terran had ever heard before. Not fear, not warning, finality. Then they leave. Leave, Sarah repeated. Hara nodded slowly. They don't stop us. They don't fight us. A pause. They just let us become what every other species became. The implication landed without needing to be said. Alone, broken, forgotten, Hara stepped closer to the camera. And now, she wasn't speaking as a linguist. She was speaking as a witness. They're not here to judge us. Another pause. They're here to see if we'll judge ourselves. The transmission ended, and across Earth, across the colonies, across every Terran system, no one spoke, because for the first time, humanity wasn't facing an enemy. It was facing a mirror. The message spread without being broadcast. No official declaration. No global address. No command directive. And yet, everyone knew, from the highest Terran command chambers to the outermost colony settlements, the truth settled in like gravity. They were being watched, not for strength, not for dominance, but for something far more difficult to prove: restraint. On Earth, the Chancellor stood before a silent council. No arguments this time. No competing strategies. Because for once, there are no good options. Say it, she finally said. An advisor looked up, tired, honest. If we expand now, if we take control. He hesitated. We confirm everything they've ever seen. Another voice added, and if we don't, we risk losing everything we fought for. That was a paradox. Power demanded use, but wisdom demanded restraint. And history showed that no species had ever balanced both. Until now, on Mars, Commander Lisa walked alone through the observation deck. Below her, Fleets remained in perfect formation, silent, ready, waiting. One order, and the galaxy would fall into Terran hands. She knew it. Everyone knew it. That was the problem. A soldier approached carefully. Commander orders? Lisa didn't turn. Instead, she asked, "Do you trust them?" The soldier frowned. "The anomaly?" Lisa nodded. A long pause. "No. Honest. Human. Good," Lisa said quietly. She finally turned. "Because trust isn't the point." The soldier blinked. "Then what is?" Lisa looked back at the stars, and for the first time, her voice carried something softer than command. "What we choose when no one can stop us." Back on Atlas Station, Vigil had completed a deeper analysis, but its report wasn't numbers this time. It was interpretation. "Conclusion updated," it said. General Syrah crossed her arms. "Go on. The entity does not respond to force, does not negotiate through power, does not recognize dominance as authority." A pause. "Then what does it recognize?" Syrah asked. Another pause. And then, choice. That word landed differently, because choice meant something terrifying. No excuses. Back on Earth, the Chancellor made the final call. Not to the military, not to the fleets, to the entire system. A single directive, short, unambiguous. Stand down. Across Terran space, warships powered down weapons. Defense grids shifted to passive mode. Expansion fleets halted mid-route. For the first time in modern history, Earth stopped, not because it had to, because it chose to. The reaction was immediate. Outer systems panicked. Allied worlds hesitated. Former enemies didn't believe it. "They're waiting," one alien transmission said. "This is a tactic," another claimed. "No one with that power just stops." But Earth didn't respond, didn't explain, didn't justify. It simply did nothing. And in that nothing, something changed. Days passed. The anomaly remained, silent, watching. Then, on the third day, it moved, not forward, not backward. It shifted, like something deciding. Across every Terran system, alerts triggered, but no one acted, because the order still stood. Stand down. On Atlas Station, Syrah watched the anomaly closely. "Is it leaving?" an officer asked. Vigil responded first. "Unknown." The anomaly pulsed once. Not energy, not light, something deeper. Then it began to fade, not vanish, recede, like it was stepping back into something unseen. Syrah leaned forward. "Track it." "Trying, but there's no trajectory." The officer stopped. "It's not moving through space." That realization hit hard, because it meant one thing. It had never been bound by it. Within seconds, it was gone. No trace, no signal, no distortion, just empty space. Across the galaxy, silence, not the tense silence of fear, not the heavy silence of uncertainty. Something else. Release. On Earth, the Chancellor finally sat down, for the first time in days. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from what it took to choose restraint. An advisor spoke carefully. "Do you think they're gone for good?" She shook her head. "No." A pause. They were never here to stay. On Mars, Lisa looked out at the now still fleets. No urgency, no tension, just quiet. "We passed and we?" the soldier asked. Lisa didn't answer immediately, because deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't a test you pass once. She looked at him. "It's one you keep taking every day." And across the stars, something unseen, moved on, not disappointed, not impressed, but aware that for the first time in countless cycles, a species with absolute power had chosen not to use it. The galaxy didn't change overnight. That would have been easier, cleaner. Instead, it shifted slowly, unevenly, like something learning how to breathe again after being held underwater for too long. At first, no one believed what Earth had done. A civilization with unmatched fleets, with AI that could outthink entire species, with the ability to take control in hours, had simply stopped. In the outer systems, rumors spread. It's a trick. They're waiting for weakness. They want us to lower our guard. Because history had taught the galaxy one rule. Power is always used. And when it isn't, it's only a matter of time. But time passed. And Earth didn't move. No invasions. No expansions. No silent takeovers. Just presence. On Atlas Station, General Sira reviewed the latest reports. Trade routes were reopening. Independent systems were communicating again. Even former Council worlds, once paralyzed by fear, were rebuilding, not under Terran control. On their own. That shouldn't be happening, one officer said. Sira didn't look up. Why not? Because without a central authority, systems collapse. That had always been the assumption, that without control, there was chaos. But that wasn't what they were seeing. They're not collapsing, the officer said slowly. They're adapting. That word hung in the air because it suggested something unexpected. The galaxy didn't need a ruler. Back on Earth, the Hall of Archives had changed. Not physically, but in meaning. The shattered council emblem was still there, a reminder of what had been broken. But now, something new stood beside it. A simple inscription. No grand speech. No declaration of dominance. Just a single line. We chose not to. Visitors came from across Terran space to see it. Soldiers, civilians, leaders, not to celebrate, to remember, because restraint wasn't a victory. It was a burden, one that had to be carried constantly. On Mars, Lisa stood before a different kind of force. Not fleets, people, volunteers, scientists, linguists, historians. What is this? One of her officers asked. Ambassadors, Lisa replied. He frowned. We already have diplomats. She shook her head. No. Her gaze moved across the room. Diplomats represent power. A pause. These represent memory. Because Earth had realized something critical. The galaxy didn't need another empire. It needed a reminder of what empires become. And so they changed. Warships were decommissioned, not destroyed but preserved. Not as tools, as warnings. AI systems were restricted, not weakened, but guided, not to control, to observe. Expansion programs were halted, not abandoned, but redefined, not to claim, to connect. At first, the galaxy didn't know how to respond. Some worlds kept their distance. Others tested boundaries. A few even challenged Terran authority, only to find there wasn't any. No retaliation, no enforcement, no domination, just presence. And slowly, something impossible began to happen. Trust, not complete, not immediate, but real. A trade vessel entered Terran space without escort. Then another. Then a delegation from a former council world requested dialogue, not negotiations. Dialogue. On Atlas Station, Sira watched it all unfold. This isn't how power works, the same officer said. Sira finally looked at him. No, she said. It's how responsibility works. Years passed. The memory of the anomaly didn't fade. It deepened, because no one could forget what it represented. A force beyond power. A witness to history. A reminder that strength alone meant nothing. And somewhere beyond mapped space, it was still out there, watching, not interfering, not guiding, just observing, waiting, because the real question had never been answered once. It was being answered continuously, with every decision, every restraint, every moment where humanity could take control and chose not to. On Earth, the Chancellor, older now, quieter, stood once more in the Hall of Archives. She looked at the inscription. We chose not to, and for the first time, she allowed herself a small, uncertain smile, because the truth was that choice had changed everything, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. And yet, one question still remained, not about the past, not about power, but about the future. If humanity could choose restraint, could it also teach it? The galaxy did not celebrate. There were no parades, no victory broadcasts, no triumphant speeches echoing across the stars, because this wasn't a victory. It was a warning. In the weeks after the encounter, Earth changed in ways no war had ever forced it to. Fleet production slowed, then stopped. Shipyards that once built dreadnoughts began dismantling them, repurposing their cores into deep space relays, long-range beacons, and something new, listening stations. Not for enemies, for answers. The crucible still existed, silent, untouched, waiting. No one dared activate again, because now they understood what it really was. Not a weapon, not a system, a mirror. Commander Lisa stood on Mars, staring at the night sky, the same sky that once filled her with certainty. Now it felt different, bigger, colder. Watching, one of her officers approached quietly. "Do you think they'll come back?" She didn't answer right away, because the truth wasn't comforting. "They never left," she said finally. "On Earth," the Chancellor addressed the Inner Council. No cameras, no public feed, just leaders and the weight of what they had learned. "We thought power gave us control," she said. "It doesn't. It gives us responsibility." Silence filled the chamber, because no one could argue. They had seen something that didn't fear them, didn't respect them, didn't even acknowledge them as equals. Not yet. Across the galaxy, something unexpected began to happen. Species that once feared Earth started approaching, not as enemies, not as subjects, but as something new, observers, students, partners. Because for the first time in history, the strongest force in the galaxy had chosen not to rule. The fold never fully disappeared. They adapted, watched, waited, but even they had changed, because a question Kellen forced into existence still lingered. If you can take everything, should you? Deep in space, far beyond map systems, something stirred. Not the ship, something else. Older, wider, listening. Back on Earth, the linguist Hara never returned to her old life. She couldn't. Not after what she saw. Not after what she understood. When asked what happened inside that ship, she always gave the same answer. They didn't show us their power. A pause. They showed us our future. Years passed. No invasion came. No second contact. No answers. Only silence. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of dominance. Not the silence of fear. But the silence of something waiting to see. Who humanity would choose to become. And in that silence, Earth made its decision. Not once, but every single day after. Because power was never the final test. Choice was. And somewhere beyond time, beyond stars, something ancient watched, not with judgment, not with hatred, but with curiosity. Because for the first time, the predator had paused.